Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome to today's very special event. I don't do this very often anymore, so I'm so glad you're here to be part of this live webinar on natural conversation skills for introverts. Sorry if you can hear the dogs barking. I'm at a friend's house. But welcome, welcome. Please do say hello in the chat box. You can just go ahead and type in the chat box and say where you're from. And as you're doing that, I want to introduce you to someone really quick before I let her go. This is my friend's dog, Maria. I'm in Puerto Vallarta right now and they found her. So she's just been sitting in my lap. She's so sweet. So sweet. So say hi to Maria and say hello in the chat box and let us know where you're tuning in from. And I'm going to close the door in a second because that dog barking is annoying. Okay, say bye. Say bye, everyone. All right, be right back. Okay, so let's see who's here. We have Philip. I know Philip's a past client from Ontario where it's freezing cold, yes. And hello, Alex from France. Hello, Paul from BC. Anya from Germany. Carol, Doug, hello, hello. It's great to see all the innies tuning in live. So if you don't know me, I'm Michaela Chung. And I help introverts to embrace who they are, as well as develop conversational confidence and amazing social skills so that they can make real friends. So if you're just coming on now, please do say hello in the chat box. Let us know where you're tuning in from. I am in Puerto Vallarta right now. I spend a lot of time here to escape the cold in Canada, where I'm from. So I'm really happy to be here with all of you. Today we're going to be talking about some advanced secrets for natural conversation for introverts. And of course, I'm an introvert myself. A lot of people see me on YouTube or they see these webinars, which I don't do that often anymore. And they're like, you're not an introvert because you're speaking clearly and you seem really confident. And the truth is, you can be confident and well-spoken and be a great conversationalist as an introvert. And so that's why I've dedicated a lot of my work to helping introverts to build these skills. And you might have seen my work on HuffPost. I've been on Inc., the Chicago Tribune, CBC News, which is our main news station in Ottawa. So you might have seen me around internet land in various places, but the two things that I'm most known for are my first website, Introvert Spring, which has reached, I can't believe this, I checked this the other day, over 5.5 million introverts since its creation in 2013. And a lot of people also know me from my best-selling book, The Irresistible Introvert: Harness the Power of Quiet Charisma in a Loud World. So I feel so fortunate to be able to connect with introverts from all over the world, just like you guys. So let's see who else is tuned in. We have Bobby from Atlanta, Diane from Costa Rica, and she says it's beautiful. I've been to Costa Rica. I know it's really beautiful. So we're going to get started really quick, but please do say hello in the chat box if you're just joining us now. And yeah, I find that our community of introverts is so supportive and so thoughtful and growth-minded, and I really appreciate that. And I think the reason why we have such a great community of introverts and why thoughtful, growth-minded introverts are attracted to me and my work is because I really do understand the struggle that introverts go through. I really do. I know that introverts face a lot of negative press. So the word introversion has a lot of negative connotations to it. I can remember a while ago when I was promoting my book, The Irresistible Introvert, I did a radio interview on a show called The Candy Palmater Show. That's on CBC. It's our main broadcasting station in Canada. And so I did this interview, and she told me the story of how her partner was at a seminar, and oh my goodness, it just makes me cringe to think what the seminar leader did. So he wrote introvert and extrovert on the board, and he put a giant X over introvert and circled the word extrovert. And although many of you might not have had that exact experience, I've heard from thousands of introvert readers who say they've had similar experiences where they've been shamed for being an introvert. And for me, when I tell people that I work with introverts, they say things like, oh, are you a reformed introvert? Or do you turn them into extroverts? And the answer is hell no. I help introverts to embrace who they are, get rid of all of that negative self-talk, all of that wasting your energy trying to be extroverted, embrace your strengths, and develop your own natural charisma and smart conversation and connection skills so you don't feel so drained and overwhelmed. All right, so I want to assure you I'm never going to tell you just to turn into an extrovert. All right, so I promised that those of you who came in early on time for this webinar that I'd share an embarrassing story that I haven't shared before, haven't shared this anywhere before. And I think even though a lot of you may not have had this exact experience, I think you will relate to the social awkwardness that occurred. So this is an embarrassing story involving a very famous best-selling author. I think like at least 80% of you will have probably heard of this person. I'm not going to say his name, but very famous, including that famous author, a networking event, and a third wheel. So this experience actually happened as I was just, getting Introvert Spring going, my first website. I now have a website called Introvert Social Skills, but anyway. So for those of you who don't know, I had quit my job, sold everything that wouldn't fit in a suitcase, and went off to find my purpose. And after 3 months, I found that purpose in helping introverts. And I started my first website, and I started coaching and teaching courses. And during that journey, like, a couple years in, I joined this mastermind of location-independent entrepreneurs. So entrepreneurs who could just work from their computer. And it was kind of a bigger mastermind. So there were a lot of people, and some people were, more new. Some people were actually very, very successful, including this famous author who's a New York Times bestselling author now. He wasn't at that point, and a very famous blogger. And at that time, he was already very famous online. So I really admired this author, and I was really excited to meet him at the live event. And so most of the time he was surrounded by a big group of people. He was the center of attention. But there was a point when he was speaking to one other person, and Maria, come here. I can hear there's a little puppy in here. She's kind of whimpering. So anyways, I really wanted to meet this author, and I saw there was my chance. He was only talking to one other person. And so I went and I stood there to introduce myself, to join the conversation. And can you guess what happened? They didn't even acknowledge me. They just ignored me. And I kind of stood there for, I don't know how long. It felt like an eternity, waiting for them to acknowledge me. And they never did. So I just was like, well, what do I do now? And I just kind of scampered off awkwardly. And it's one of those experiences that everyone's had that. For me, I mean, it was embarrassing because it was someone I really admired. But as introverts, I'm sure you can relate to that feeling of like, especially in group situations, how do you approach people? How do you enter a conversation that's already in progress? And I think today's tools will help you to gain confidence in those kinds of situations. But here's a little bonus tip. if people are already engaged in conversation, it's really important to read their body language. So it's okay to approach, but if they look like they're very, like really intimate, speaking closely, and their body language is very closed, they probably aren't at a point where they want to invite someone new into the conversation. But if they're standing at more of an angle, a little bit more open, you can approach, but within the first 10 seconds, really read their body language, because people who are open to you joining their conversation will actually, pause and say, oh, hi, we were just talking about such and such. So that's a little bonus tip. But unfortunately, that's not the only kind of awkward and hurtful experience that's happened along my journey as I kind of learned to embrace my introversion and help other introverts. Early on, before I started Introvert Spring, and actually, this is the experience that inspired me to start Introvert Spring. I was with a group of travelers in New Zealand. Now, in the past, I usually traveled alone, but I joined up with about, 4 or 5 other travelers, and I spent the whole day with them. And as an introvert yourselves, you know how exhausting that is when you're out with other people and you have no chance to be by yourself, no chance to go home and recharge. That's really exhausting. And at the time, I didn't have the tools that I now teach. Okay, I didn't know how to balance my energy and how to socialize without getting overwhelmed and all of that. I didn't know. So after a whole day of socializing, I can remember we were at a cafe. It was kind of like a Middle Eastern hookah bar in New Zealand. And I had just kind of gone quiet. I'd gone into introvert mode. So I was so mentally drained that I zoned out, and I was just staying quiet, and I was just kind of, listening to the conversation. So I didn't even notice that I had really gone that quiet, but other people had. And I think you know where this is going. So, what happened next is what I think every introvert dreads. One of the people in the group, who was a very nice man, but very extroverted, called me out as we were walking from this hookah bar to a club. Can you imagine? A dance club. He said, hey, why are you so quiet? You need to talk. You need to be in the moment. And he was just really pressuring me. And I knew about introversion at the time, so I tried to explain to him, you know what, I'm actually an introvert, so sometimes I need quiet. And he didn't get it. He came from a culture that was very extroverted, and he wouldn't stop. He's like, no, but you have to talk to people. And I was already so drained. And for me, when I'm really drained, I get emotional. So I started to cry. And then he was like, oh my goodness, what's wrong? And it was so mortifying, because there I was with these people I had just met. And, I was with the man who had confronted me, and then the rest of the people were up about 50 feet ahead. And they stopped, and they turned and looked at me, and they're like, what's going on? Why is she crying? And it was such a painful experience. And so I pulled myself together, and I did go to the dance club with them. But I can remember the whole time as I was kind of, dancing, I just kept thinking, you know what? I want to let other introverts know that it's okay to be an introvert. And I want to help them so that they never have to experience what I experienced that day. And truly, that's when Introvert Spring started. I didn't actually physically start the website and my business until I think a month or a month and a half later. But that's when it was really born, because that's when I decided, I was like, I'm going to reach hundreds of thousands of introverts, and I'm going to let them know it's okay to be an introvert. And that's what's happened. We've reached 5.5 million introverts, and we're always growing. So that's my story. Let me know in the chat box if you've ever had a similar experience where you've been called out for being an introvert, shamed. Have you been shamed for being an introvert? Let us know. Let us all know so that we can feel like we're not alone. We're not in this alone, and it's okay to be an introvert. All right, so we're going to dive right in because today we're covering some really master conversation skills for introvert and social skills in general. These are going to help you not just talk, but to connect with people. So I'm going to show you how to overcome awkwardness, especially that initial awkwardness when you're meeting someone new, and how to be more engaging and feel open and natural in conversation. I'll also share my #1 tip for mastering small talk, even if you hate it. An easy exercise to be witty and sharp in conversation. A lot of people want to know, how can you be more witty and come up with things to say more quickly? Because as introverts, we tend to speak more slowly. So I'm going to share a quick stand-up comedy exercise to be more clever and spontaneous in conversation. So this is going to help your mind work in that way that makes you more witty. Plus, I'll share the 3 essential P's of interesting conversations. These help you transform small talk into meaningful conversations. Are you guys ready? All right, so I'll have a sip of water and then we can dive in. Let me just check on my little friend. I'm at a friend's house here in Puerto Vallarta, and they have 3 dogs. And the littlest one, is that a word? The smallest one is just under the bed here. I introduced her to the people who got here right on time. So there's a lesson to be on time for my webinars. Maria! Maria! Want to come say hello? Okay. Let's just, before we dive in, say hello. I love animals. I think as introverts, animals are so recharging for us and healing. So she's so relaxed. Okay, you can sit with me for a little bit. All right, so let's dive into what are we going to start with first? How to overcome awkwardness and be naturally engaging. So how many of you feel awkward when you're meeting someone new? Just say yes in the chat box. Let me know. And what about group conversations? Do you feel awkward when you're in a group and you don't know when to speak up and when it's your turn to speak, how much to say? If that makes you feel awkward, okay, bye Maria. Let me know in the chat box by saying yes. Okay, so I definitely know how you feel. Although now I've really developed a lot more confidence. When I initially meet someone, especially if I'm entering a group of people I don't know, there is always that initial kind of, oh my God, like bracing myself for what's to come. But I'll tell you what helps to prevent that and how I nip it in the bud. So the first step to feel more natural is to always shift out of introvert mode before you socialize. So what I mean by introvert mode is, when you've been alone for a while, maybe you've been working by yourself, maybe you've been reading, you've been doing a solo activity, or you've been thinking, you've been in your head. So you're in introvert mode. There's a very big difference between introvert mode and social mode, and you use different parts of your brain. And so introverts can find it hard to switch gears. We can find it very difficult to switch out of introvert mode into then, working our conversation muscles, thinking on the spot, being witty. And I know that lunchtime at work is a great example of this. A lot of you probably, prefer to be by yourself at lunchtime. You avoid the group lunch table. Maybe not all of you, but I know for me, when I used to work in offices or places where, we all shared a lunchroom, I would want to be by myself because I was not in social mode at that point. I was in work mode. And even if my work was talking to people, that's different than being in social mode. And I also needed that time to recharge. So if you're at home and you're about to go to a social event, it's really important to get out of that introvert mode. And I'll give you 2 ways that you can easily do that. So one that I use to this day is a quick little I am here now meditation. So what I'll do is I'll really get in my body using mindfulness techniques. So I'll just start to breathe deeply and actually feel myself in my body, look around, be aware of where I am and how my body feels. And I'll just say to myself, I am here now, and really feel that. And I'll repeat it. And then, right before I talk to someone new, or even if I have a webinar like this one, I will do that meditation and I'll just say in my head, I am here now, just to really shift into out of my head and into the present moment. And another thing that helps to actually warm up your conversation muscles and you get you in social mode is this really simple tip to read out loud. It's that simple. Because how many of you have been socializing and you've been alone for a while and you just keep stumbling over your words? And it's like your speaking muscles haven't warmed up yet. And so if you just read a couple paragraphs out loud before you go out, it makes it easier for you to speak more clearly, and it actually activates that conversational part of your brain. So give that a try next time before you go out and socialize. Okay, so let me just take a look at the chat box here. So I'm loving hearing from you guys. So Mike says small talk is awkward for me. So lots of people saying yes to feeling awkward in conversation and meeting someone new. So a lot of the awkwardness I feel comes from small talk. And as an introvert like me, you probably have a sincere disdain for small talk. And it's hard to have engaging conversations and feel natural when you hate small talk. So I'm going to share my #1 tip for mastering small talk, even if it makes you cringe. So the #1 thing is to look for jump-off points. Okay, so jump-off points in conversation are those little bits of information that you can use as launch pads into more interesting topics. So you can bounce off and expand on that, or you can jump to a related topic from those points. So an example of this would be if someone talks about how they were gardening on the weekend, you can use that as a jump off point to ask them more about gardening. You can share your experience with gardening, like, oh, I just bought a houseplant. That's as far as my gardening goes. Or I'm curious about how you grow vegetables, or blah, blah, blah. So you're looking for those opportunities. And it's really important in order to see those opportunities to be present. You're not going to see the jump off points if you're in small talk autopilot. So if you're just like, okay, I'm just going to be a passenger in this conversation and just endure it, which believe me, I've been there. So it does require presence and actually, listening, looking for those jump off points. And here's another tip for making more meaningful small talk. And it seems so obvious, and yet many of us don't do it. And that is to only ask questions that you actually care about. How many times have you asked a question just to keep the conversation going and you don't really care? And granted, in in the first 1 minute of conversation, it's okay to ask those predictable questions. And at that point, I recommend you flip the logic. So care about the questions you ask. So you might not think you care about the question, how was your day? But actually focus on, okay, I'm asking that and I actually care about the answer. But later on in the conversation, don't just ask questions just to fill empty airspace. Ask questions that you actually want to know the answer to. That's going to make it way easier to have sincere conversations, and you'll naturally expand the conversation. You'll naturally take things deeper because you care. You actually care about what you're talking about. So this is where it really helps to know how to expand conversations with some go-to questions that you actually care about. So plan those questions ahead of time, have some in your back pocket, and know some stories that you want to share, and know how to add some playfulness so that you can get out of small talk and actually have more interesting conversations that you care about. And this is something I talk about in more detail in my Introvert Conversation Genius course. But the key thing with applying what I've just shared is, remember, it's about commitment and presence. That really is the first step. And then you can really shift the conversation and use those jump off points and start talking about things that you care about. So, okay, interesting comments here. Alex says, a nuclear alarm starts in his head at this moment. So I'm actually not sure which moment, but I think for introverts, oftentimes in new conversations, there are all these thoughts. We're thinking a lot about how we're being perceived, and we're overthinking things. And that's why, taking that moment to say, I am here now, be present in your body, really makes a big difference. Mike says, guilty of asking questions and then I zone out in order to think of what I need to ask next. Yeah. So ask a question you care about and really fully listen to the answer, because when you listen to the answer, those jump off points will appear and you'll know what to talk about next. People can really tell when you're fully listening to their answers. Okay, so now let's talk about, I've been excited to share this little tip with you. So this is that exercise to be more witty in conversation. So how many of you are kind of slow in conversation? And I don't mean dumb, I mean literally, like it takes you a while to come up with what you're gonna say. I know I definitely have a slower way of communicating, but you absolutely can make that work for you, especially if you have go-to things that you know you're gonna say. And with this exercise that I'm gonna share with you that I learned from stand-up comedy, then it's gonna help get your brain more fired up so that you can be sharper and quicker in conversation. Because as some of you know, some of you may not know, I'm actually an insider when it comes to stand-up comedy and being funny, because I do stand-up comedy on the side. It's crazy how I got started, but I guess it was, how long ago? Maybe 6 months ago now. I was in Peru and I got food poisoning, and all I could do was lie in bed for like 24 hours on my side, and I started watching stand-up comedy. I'd never been that into it before, but I saw it and I was like, you know what? I think I could do that. And then I started writing. I entered a competition. And before the competition, I was like, oh my goodness, I need help with this. So I hired a coach, because when you're, making such a drastic shift from something you've never done before, really changing your identity, it helps so much to have a mentor. So I hired a coach. I did a 5-day stand-up comedy intensive in Las Vegas. And in that intensive, I learned 13 joke structures, several laughter triggers. I learned how to do act outs, how to be funny on stage. And then later, I learned how to transfer that to conversation. So not all of the joke structures work in conversation, but being the introvert, kind of obsessive person that I am, I, through trial and error, figured out ways to best apply the stand-up comedy tools that I discovered to conversation. So one thing that I learned that really helps with being sharper in conversation is something called the word association exercise. So this is really simple, and I'll tell you why it works. Is when it comes to comedy, you may not have realized it, but comedy is all about making connections, right? A comedian will say like, oh, sleeping with my wife is like, and they'll make a comparison, right? So you're making a connection between two things that don't seem to connect. Or you use double entendres. So different meanings for one word. And like there are a lot of examples of this in innuendo, right? I'm not going to say them now because this is a PG-13 webinar, but a lot of people will use double entendres and sexual innuendos. So one thing that we do is a word association exercise, and that's where you just look up on Google, look up random word generator. And this is just, you'll find a tool that it just pops up random words. And whenever a random word pops up, you write down 5 different meanings or associations for that word. Okay, so this really helps activate the part of your brain that makes connections. And before you know it, you start actually making those connections in conversations. And I can tell you that when I am doing my stand-up comedy exercises and when I'm writing jokes every day, I'm way funnier in conversation because that part of my brain is activated. Okay, but even if you're not like me and you haven't done a stand-up comedy intensive and private coaching on how to tell jokes, and by the way, I came in first in my round of that competition on my 3rd time on stage. I was going against people who'd been doing it for years, who were really known in the comedy community, and everyone was like, "Who is she? Like, how did she come first in her round?" And it's all because I did that stand-up comedy intensive, and I am a writer, and I am pretty good at making connections in my head to begin with, but I was able to make it to the semifinals, and since then, I go on at the local club at least twice a month. I do lots of independent shows. I've been paid to do comedy, which is crazy within the first few months. So yeah, it's been quite a journey, but like I said, I learned 13 joke structures and several laughter triggers and how to tell funny stories. And I condensed the best conversation tools for being funny in conversation into my Introvert Conversation Genius course, which for those of you who aren't familiar with it, for those of you who I know, this is exactly what you need to take your conversations to the next level. It's a 4-day quickie video course. So just 4 days, and we cover day 1, conversation starters. So how to make a lasting impression. I share my OR method for preventing awkward silences and moving the conversation forward. Day 2, I share how to be funny and playful in conversation. So that's where I share those things that I learned in stand-up comedy, those triggers that make people laugh, how to be playful, how to have those fun conversations that feel natural, as well as an easy structure for funny stories. So you can tell a funny story in just a few sentences without being necessarily very gregarious. Day 3, we talk about, this is actually my favorite lesson, how to have difficult conversations. Because I get so many messages from introverts who say, how do you deal with people who disrespect you, who push you, misunderstand you? How do you explain your needs? And this video gives you the 8 crucial steps to have those kind of difficult conversations and come out gaining respect and actually improving the relationship. So I know introverts hate conflict, but this is a method to actually grow closer and build stronger connections while gaining respect and expressing yourself like you've never expressed yourself before. It really works. I use it in my own personal life, and I'll share a story of a student who used it right away and saw results. So if you have a family member, you've been meaning to tell them something that you just can't stand anymore, this is the tool for you. And so finally in day 4, we talk about how to be yourself in conversation. So a lot of introverts feel very restricted in conversation. You know you have more to say, more to offer, but it's like there's this barrier. And people tell you to just loosen up and be yourself, but you're like, how? How can I do that with someone new? And so this video gives you 5 smart steps to really open up, even if you're normally guarded. And I have to say that this method really works, especially this 4-day method is wonderful because it's short. I mean, how many of you have taken courses that were like, 3 months long, or, they had so many modules and you never finished them? You spent so much money, you never finished them. And they were full of fluff. They were full of stuff you didn't need. This gives you exactly what you need to start having fun conversations, interesting conversations with new people, difficult conversations, playful conversations right away. And you don't have to fear giving up because it's so short. You can do it in a week. You can do it in a couple of days, and you have lifetime access. Plus, it's one of the only courses out there that's truly designed with the challenges of introverts in mind. A lot of courses say that we help introverts to build confidence and blah, 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 but they're made by extroverts, and they don't really understand what it's like to be an introvert and the challenges that we face. So I'm going to get to the 3 Ps of engagement in a moment, but as I promised, I want to share an email from Christina, who after just a week of doing the course said, "The OR method helped me tremendously when I went to visit a friend and her family. I watched your video the day before I left, and I was surprised how quickly it worked. I wasn't perfect, and you don't have to be perfect, but I noticed that I was reacting positively towards people's conversations, even if they were talking negatively." So amazing results for Christina. And also my student Keith said, "I took the advice from the video, and the best thing now is that I'm now the most popular person at work, and I can connect with people outside of work. It's like I can meet any new person and make them feel comfortable and interested in me." So I want to just let you know that Introvert Conversation Genius is on sale now, but prices go up in 3 days. So, how much longer do you want to put off connection? How much longer do you want to feel awkward in conversation? Probably not a minute longer, when you can easily develop a few easy skills to really turn things around, start making real connections in conversation. So I'm just going to pop in the link to join Introvert Conversation Genius at the reduced rate. So let me just find that. And feel free to ask questions as we go along. Just mark them as a question. Just be sure to mark them as a question. Okay, here it is. Here we go. So there you go. You can just press the blue button to learn more about Introvert Conversation Genius and get it at a reduced rate before prices go up in 3 days, even less if you're watching the replay. So I know some of you want more one-on-one guidance and accountability and personalized advice. So later I'll share a way that you can work more closely with me and a mastermind of like-minded introverts. But for now, let's talk about the 3 Ps of engagement. These are the 3 P's that are crucial for having more interesting, engaging conversations, transforming small talk into real connection. So the first is planning. So plan out your interesting questions that you care about, questions that you actually care about, and your go-to responses and your stories. So think of something funny that happened recently, and then craft a short story. And again, I share how to craft stories in a way that's short and sweet and very engaging in my Introvert Conversation Genius course. But just plan ahead what you're going to say, the funny thing you're going to say, and know this: you can share the same story with more than one person. I know I used to always get annoyed with my mom because everyone she spoke to, she'd say the same thing, she'd tell the same stories, and I'd be there and I'd be hearing it again and again. But remember, the different people that you talk to haven't heard your story before. So if you have a really funny story that's worked before, if you've made people laugh unexpectedly, you can share that again in your next conversation. And that's what comedians do. Comedians really hone their set. And when you see that Netflix special, that's not the first time they've done those jokes or the second or the third. I mean, they spend several months or even years trying out those jokes, reworking them. A lot of them get cut so that they can present the ones that really work. And to a smaller extent, you can do that in conversation. Refine your stories a little bit. Have those funny stories that you tell that you know are crowd pleasers. And by the way, those kind of stories, those stories that always make people like surprised or they make people laugh. Those can be the kind of short stories that you share in group conversations. A lot of introverts struggle with group conversations. And sometimes, you might not be ready to share a whole story with a group. That's fine. But if you are at that point, you have the confidence to share a story, use one that's tried and true, especially in a group. Okay, so the second P of engagement is presence. So get into your body. Again, I've said this before, but it's so key. Focus on sensations. Look people in the eye and really shift out of how people perceive you and focus on listening for the jump off points and taking those opportunities to share something interesting about yourself. And there's so much more I could say about how to share, what's important to share, and how to bring what you say to life. But for now, focus on presence. And if you're ready to dive deeper, do click the link to check out Introvert Conversation Genius. So the third P of playfulness is the third. You can tell I've been talking for a while because my words are getting jumbled. So the third P of engagement is playfulness. Playfulness. And I know this is hard if you're just talking to someone new and you feel kind of restricted, but playfulness is an attitude. It's an attitude that you can step into before you even are in front of people. So see things as an experiment instead of a test. So this socializing isn't about getting it perfect. Try things out, experiment a little bit. And if you aren't perfect, if you say the wrong thing, let it go. Believe me, I know how easy it is to ruminate about it and go home and think, oh my goodness, I can't believe I said that, or did I offend that person? Did I say the wrong thing? Meanwhile, the other person forgot 2 seconds after you said it. And so it's important to just forgive yourself, really let it go so that you can refocus on the conversation. Be playful and don't be so hard on yourself. So if you want more tips to be playful and funny in conversation, including examples of how to craft a funny story and make people laugh. Even if you're not the funny one, please do check out Introvert Conversation Genius before it's too late, before prices go up to full price in 3 days. They really will go up in 3 days. All right, so we're going to move on to a question period. This is a great opportunity to ask me specific questions about how you can feel more natural, about specific challenges that you have as an introvert, making friends, talking to people. Please do write that in the chat box, but mark it as a question because there's so many comments, it's easy for it to get lost. Okay, so as promised, for those of you who you want to take things a bit deeper and you want a bit more support, if you're someone who, for example, you desperately want to connect, but you tend to push people away at a certain point, if you're someone who goes through a lot of social ups and downs, so you make a few friends only to return to painful isolation, or if you're someone who you have a high level of emotional intelligence, which makes superficial friendships unbearable, and if you're someone who you really know you have more love and goodness to share with the world and with the people around you, but you feel like something just keeps holding you back, just keeps pulling you back to a state of loneliness or a state of just not having the friendships that you want. If that sounds like you, there's probably something deeper at play, and it's probably going to take a bit more energy and support to have the kind of social life that you want and to really turn things around. And so if that's you, I invite you to take a look at my new Introvert Connections Mastermind. I'm not going to go into much detail right now about it. This is something very, very different than anything I've offered before. This is a 10-person only mastermind. It's not for everyone. It's a VIP community that offers one-on-one support from me, as well as connection and feedback from a 100% supportive group of other like-minded introverts. So it's a chance to be held accountable and supported so that you can transform your social life faster and connect with quality people. By quality, I mean people who are committed to their own growth, people who are accepting and supportive. So if you've thought about, I know a lot of people have reached out and asked how they can work one-on-one with me. If you've thought about that, this is your chance to have a little bit more one-on-one support and connect with other introverts at the same time. So I'm going to pop in the link to check that out. And you'll see on that page just a simple application. So you just fill out the application and then we'll have a chat and see if it's right for you, because it's not for everyone. It's not for everyone, but if it is for you, it really will change your life. Okay, so let's look at these questions. Oh, thank you, Ine, for marking your question as a question. So Ine asks, talk about when you're feeling like everyone's watching and you feel really uncomfortable. It's really disturbing my daily life. Okay. So that is what's known as the spotlight effect. When you feel like everybody's watching you and you think, like, especially when you walk into a room of people, you think everyone's watching your every move as if you're on stage, when really they're probably not, right? So how can you deal with the spotlight effect? So again, this has a lot to do with the pre-game stuff. So what's happening on a deeper level, what's happening inside your head before you even come in contact with people. And the presence and getting into your body helps a lot. Trying to think of another tool or exercise. So do practice the I am here now tool. And also, I think with this one, a big thing is shifting your focus. So when you have this spotlight effect, you're very focused on yourself and how you're being perceived. But when you shift your focus to, okay, what can I give to people? How can I make other people feel comfortable right now? That's going to shift you out of your mindset. You're going to stop thinking about yourself. And it's like I always say, it's about going into conversations with a giver's mindset as opposed to a beggars mindset. So a beggars mindset is really focused on what you're taking away from people, and it's very self-focused, whereas a giver's mindset is, okay, I'm coming into the conversation with something to give. I can give my presence. I can make the person feel at ease. Maybe I've been to this place more than them. Maybe it's a class I've been in longer, or maybe it's a social group I'm more familiar with. How can I make them feel more comfortable? So shift your focus to how you can make other people feel good, and that will help with that. Okay, so let's see. Dora says, I don't have anything to say in front of people I don't know well. I can't even think what to say. It's like a blank page. How to deal with this? So again, this is where having topics, go-to questions that you care about, and maybe like 1 or 2 stories, simple stories, really helps. And I don't know if you have already, Dora, but if you haven't, do download my introvert conversation cheat sheet. Excuse me. So it's free. My introvert conversation cheat sheet does have some go-to topics and questions so that you can kind of prepare ahead of time. And I recommend just choosing 2, maximum 3 of questions or topics that you're going to focus on so you don't get overwhelmed. Because when you're in the moment, you're like, oh, there's too many things, and then you can't think of anything. So just choose a few things. So you can get my introvert conversation cheat sheet on introvertsocialskills.com. introvertsocialskills.com if you haven't already, but actually I think if you signed up for this webinar, it was sent to you already. I just realized that, yeah, I think it was sent to you automatically. Okay, so Bobby asks, I've never traveled outside of my country and I'm planning on a trip in a few years. I'm worried about talking with people where there's a huge difference in culture. Do you have any tips for talking more comfortably with people who might be vastly different from myself? Great question. And that reminds me, I should say, I should have mentioned that I've lived in several countries and traveled long-term. Like I've spent a couple months here, a couple months there, in Colombia, Thailand. I've lived in Australia. I've lived in different cities in Canada. So I know what it's like to make friends in new cities, new countries, and to talk to people from other cultures as well, to connect with people from other cultures. So, okay, one thing that helps when you're talking to someone and you immediately think, they're so different from me, stop yourself from judging. And when I say judging, I mean like that moment when you're like, oh, we have nothing in common, so I'm going to check out. I'm going to check out of this conversation. Instead, expect that you can connect with anyone. So instead of immediately thinking, oh, we have nothing in common, really ground yourself and think, okay, I'm open to connecting. I'm going to look for those jump off points. And the other thing is, I find with people from other cultures, it's really, they're the same connection points. There are always things you can connect on. And, you know, something I talk about with my students, so bonus tip, is there are 3 zones of connection that people care about in conversation. One is the kind of external zone, the outward expressions. One is relationships, and one is the inward expression. So outward expressions are more of like people's hobbies, the TV shows that they like, their work. So they're the things that they're doing in the world. Those are outward expressions. That's a potential topic where you can connect with someone. Relationships. So people's animals, people's family, people their dating life, right? So some people really like talking about outer expressions. They want to talk about the news. They want to talk about politics. Some people want to talk about relationships. I love talking about relationships. I really care about, I find it interesting, like, oh, what's happening, with in your relationship, because that's just the kind of person I am. I like hearing about people's animals. I like hearing about emotions. And then the inner expressions are things that have to do with a person's values, their goals, their personal growth pursuits, their esoteric beliefs, so those inner things. And here's the thing to remember. None of these are superior. You just have to figure out what zone is more important to the person you're talking to. So try out focusing on those zones and finding common ground there, releasing judgment. And I actually find I connect better with people from other cultures, provided we speak the same language. Because it's hard to connect if you don't speak the same language. But I find people from other cultures. I'm Canadian. Like, most of my friends weren't born in Canada. They immigrated when they were young, or just like 10 years ago. And I find we get along because they're really warm and we have the same values. So maybe focus on your values that you share. Okay. So Al asks, what can I say in the moment I'm being shamed for being quiet in a group of strangers? So there really are so many elements to this. 8 steps specifically that I do go into in the difficult conversations lessons of Introvert Conversation Genius, which I'm just going to put up the link again for that. Press the wrong button. Yes. So, sorry, I got distracted because I wanted to put up the link again for Introvert Conversation Genius. I want as many of you as possible. It's my most popular course, by the way. So you want to get it on special while you can. What can I say in the moment? Okay, so many steps, but I'd say the most important thing is, first of all, to use softening statements, because you don't want to create more conflict. So a softening statement would be something like, I know you didn't mean to make me feel this way. I know it wasn't your intention, but when this happened, I felt XYZ. So going back to the example of when I was introvert shamed in New Zealand and I cried, what I would have said was, I would have said, I know this isn't your intention, but it makes me feel really uncomfortable and put on the spot when people point out my quietness. So yeah, I just prefer to be alone. I mean, I just prefer to be quiet sometimes, and that's just part of who I am. And so within that statement, I want to point out a couple of things. So you're softening it by saying, or I was softening it by saying, I know this wasn't your intention, but it makes me feel uncomfortable. So how did it make you feel? First of all, it makes me feel uncomfortable when people, put me on the spot, when people criticize me in public, makes me feel uncomfortable. So notice I said people instead of you. So that takes practice, but as much as possible, take you out and just say, when this happens or when people do this, it just lessens conflict. It really softens it, and because when you say you, people go into defensive. You want people to really hear you. You want to be heard. And if they persist, that's when you become a little more firm. I have had people, a family member in the past who was criticizing me for being vegan, because I follow a vegan diet. And this was an older member of my family, and he was like, oh, well, you can't eat that way, and you have to eat meat. And well, you need to do it this way and that way. And I'm like, I said it pretty much that. I said, I know you don't mean to, but it makes me feel uncomfortable to be put on the spot. This is the way I eat and I like eating this way. But he persisted. He wouldn't let it go. So I said, you know what? I'm not okay with being criticized, and I'm not going to accept it. So no, pretty much. At some point, if someone persists, this is your last resort. If they persist, you say, no, I'm not okay with being criticized in public. That's just not something that I'm comfortable with. So I'm not going to accept that. And most people will not cross that line when you're firm like that. But it's, you don't usually have to go to that level. Usually it's fine to be more soft and just say how you felt, and people are very receptive to that. So, do try to be as gentle as possible. Okay, so Vlad asked, do you still spend time alone? Yes, yes, I spend a lot of time alone. I spend a lot of time alone. When people say to me, like, when I write about doing stand-up comedy, and sometimes salsa performance a couple months ago, I performed in salsa, and I talk about sometimes meeting new people and making new friends. People will message me right away and they'll be like, I can't imagine that you're really an introvert. It seems like you're always out and about and doing things. And I say, well, you're not realizing that that's a highlight, but I spend a lot of time, I work for myself, so I spend like a lot of the day by myself. And, between, I'll go through cycles where I'm socializing a lot, and then I'll spend a few days by myself. And that's perfectly okay. I want to make that clear. As an introvert, if it works for you, do honor those energy needs. But if you're feeling like you want to be socializing more than you are, then socialize, look for those opportunities to socialize more while honoring your need to recharge. So Lexi says, something I say is, I just need to introvert for a bit. I make introvert a verb as if it's an action that I need to complete at the moment. That's great. And I love it that introvert can be a verb now, because more people understand introversion now. So it's wonderful. All right, so those were really great questions. Wonderful questions from everyone. And so if you want to join Introvert Conversation Genius, do click the link. And if you want to learn more about the Introvert Connection Mastermind, you can email me, or it doesn't let me post both links at once. So let me put that link in there, because this is great for those of you who've taken all my courses already. A lot of people take multiple courses of mine. Let me grab the link. Those of you who want more one-on-one guidance and you want to take a deeper dive. Okay, so you're ready to stop a painful pattern. You've tried to do it on your own before, and you're ready to try something different and accelerate your transformation. Sorry, I'm an introvert. I'm bad at multitasking. So I'm trying to post this link and talk. It's not happening. And I was going to try and pin it. Okay, well, there's the link at the top of the chat box. Oh, actually, there we go. If you want to learn more about the Introvert Connection Mastermind. All right, so thank you so much for joining. This was so much fun. And where's Maria? Maybe Maria the dog can say goodbye. Maria, where are you? I don't know. She's resting. Okay, so bye from me and Maria, the cute little doggy that was here earlier. And I hope you enjoyed, and we will talk soon. All right, so bye everyone. Thank you so much. Bye. Bye Maria. Bye David. All right, take care everyone.